On September 21, 1956, test pilot Tom Attridge achieved something that seems impossible. He shot himself down with his own gun. Flying at supersonic speeds, he managed to catch up with his own bullets and shoot down his own aircraft. But this wasn't just a freak accident. It exposed a fundamental flaw in fighter jet design that would change aviation forever. The 1950s marked a revolutionary era in military aviation. The lessons of the Korean War had taught American military planners one crucial lesson. Speed was everything. The days of slow, turning dogfights were over. The future belonged to supersonic interceptors that could climb quickly and strike with devastating power. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, already famous for their robust carrier-based fighters, saw an opportunity. Their answer was the F11F Tiger, a sleek, single-seat fighter that looked like something straight out of science fiction. Its most distinctive feature was the application of the area rule, a revolutionary design concept that gave the fuselage a distinctive wasp waist appearance to reduce drag at high speeds. The Tiger's development involved breakthrough technologies that pushed the boundaries of 1950s engineering. Its wings featured a unique combination of sweep and taper, designed to delay the onset of transonic drag. The tail surfaces were all moving, a necessity for control at supersonic speeds. Even the windscreen was specially designed to withstand the intense heat generated at high Mach numbers. Power came from a Wright J65 turbojet engine, a licensed version of the British Armstrong Siddeley Sapphire. This power plant could generate 7,400 pounds of thrust, enabling the Tiger to reach Mach 1.1 in level flight. The engine intakes were carefully positioned on either side of the fuselage, designed to provide optimal airflow at both subsonic and supersonic speeds. The cockpit represented a leap forward in fighter design. The pilot sat high in the fuselage, providing excellent visibility, crucial for both carrier operations and air combat. The ejection seat was state-of-the-art, capable of safe ejection at supersonic speeds. The instrument panel featured the latest innovations in flight control technology, including an advanced gun sight system for the aircraft's primary armament. That armament was impressive. 4 20mm Colt Mk-12 cannons mounted in the nose, each capable of firing 1,000 rounds per minute. This placement was considered ideal. No need to worry about wing-mounted guns converging at a specific point. The nose-mounted configuration meant straight-line accuracy at any range, also the designers thought. Carrier compatibility added another layer of complexity. The landing gear had to be strong enough to handle the punishing impacts of carrier landings, yet light enough to not compromise performance. The arresting hook system required precise positioning to maintain the aircraft's aerodynamic efficiency. The folding wings, a necessity for carrier storage, had to maintain perfect alignment when extended for flight. The Navy had high hopes for the Tiger. It was meant to be their premier carrier-based interceptor, capable of catching and destroying Soviet bombers before they could threaten the fleet. The aircraft's spectacular climb rate, over 16,000 feet per minute, seemed to make it perfect for the role. In full afterburner, the Tiger could reach altitudes of 46,800 feet, well above the operational ceiling of most potential threats. Production moved at a blistering pace. The first prototype flew in July 1954, barely 2 years after project initiation. This speed of development was unprecedented, even by the standards of the time. The aircraft exceeded expectations in early tests, reaching Mach 1.1 with ease. Carrier qualifications were completed in record time, and the Navy placed an initial order for 200 aircraft. The F11F represented everything the Navy thought they wanted in a modern fighter: speed, simplicity, and hitting power. Each aircraft cost $1.27 million, a bargain by today's standards, but a significant investment in 1950s dollars. The Navy justified the cost by pointing to the Tiger's versatility. It could serve as an interceptor, fighter bomber, and reconnaissance platform, making it a true multi-role aircraft before the term became popular. Testing protocols for the F11F were extensive, but focused primarily on carrier suitability and engine performance. The test pilots put the aircraft through thousands of simulated carrier landings, high-speed dives, and combat maneuvers. The Tiger performed admirably in all these tests, building confidence among both the Navy brass and Grumman's engineers. The F11F's success seemed assured when it broke several time-to-climb records. In one demonstration, it reached 10,000 feet in just 73 seconds, a feat that impressed even skeptical observers. The aircraft's performance validated Grumman's design philosophy of emphasizing speed and climb rate over maneuverability. By early 1956, the Tiger was entering service with frontline Navy squadrons. Pilots praised its straightforward handling characteristics and impressive acceleration. The aircraft's sleek lines and powerful engine made it a favorite among airshow crowds, leading to its selection as the mount for the Blue Angels demonstration team. Training programs were developed to transition pilots from older aircraft to the Tiger. The emphasis was on high-speed intercept tactics, reflecting the Navy's focus on defending carrier groups against Soviet bombers. Pilots were taught to exploit the Tiger's superior climb rate and powerful guns to make quick, decisive attacks. But while the F11F appeared to be a triumph of American engineering, its rapid development had hidden a deadly flaw, one that would only become apparent when physics and fate collided at 20,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean. At the heart of the F11F's design flaw lay a fundamental misunderstanding of supersonic physics. When a bullet leaves a gun barrel, it travels along a ballistic trajectory, an arcing path influenced by gravity, air resistance, and initial velocity. At subsonic speeds, this trajectory is predictable, but at supersonic speeds, everything changes. The Tiger's engineers had accounted for basic ballistics in their calculations. What they hadn't fully considered was how the complex aerodynamics of supersonic flight would affect their equations. As an aircraft enters a steep dive at supersonic speeds, it creates powerful shock waves that can actually alter the path of projectiles fired from its own guns. Adding to this complexity was the F11F's unique design feature, its nose-mounted guns. While this configuration offered superior accuracy compared to wing-mounted weapons, it introduced new problems. The muzzle blast from 420mm cannons created a high-pressure zone directly in front of the aircraft. This disrupted the airflow around the engine intakes, potentially causing power loss at critical moments. The Tiger's area rule design, while revolutionary for reducing drag, created its own challenges. The wasp waist fuselage meant that ammunition storage had to be carefully positioned to maintain the aircraft's center of gravity. This resulted in an unusually long ammunition feed path to the guns, increasing the risk of jams during high-G maneuvers. Test pilots have reported occasional engine surges during gunnery exercises, but these were attributed to normal teething problems. No one connected these incidents to a potentially lethal design flaw. The focus remained on the aircraft's impressive performance numbers rather than its subtle aerodynamic quirks. Another overlooked factor was the effect of altitude on bullet trajectory. As air density decreases with altitude, bullets experience less drag. This means they maintain their velocity longer, but also follow a more unpredictable path. The Tiger's operational ceiling of 46,800 feet meant it would often be firing its guns in thin air, where traditional ballistic calculations became less reliable. The F11F's high thrust-to-weight ratio could actually compound these problems. In a steep dive with afterburners engaged, the aircraft could accelerate so rapidly that it would begin to catch up with its own projectiles as they slowed due to air resistance. This created a dangerous convergence zone where aircraft and bullets could potentially meet. The Tiger's advanced gun sight had serious limitations that weren't immediately apparent. While it was calibrated for typical combat scenarios, high-speed passing shots at relatively close range, it couldn't account for the complex physics of supersonic flight. The sight's ranging calculations assumed the target and firing aircraft were separate entities, never considering that they might be one and the same. The aircraft's cutting-edge supersonic design introduced other complications. The swept wings essential for supersonic flight, affected the aircraft's stability during high-speed maneuvers. During a dive, especially when firing the guns, the Tiger could experience subtle pitch changes that pilots might not notice until it was too late. Wind tunnel testing, while extensive, hadn't revealed these potential issues. The tests focused on basic aerodynamics and handling characteristics, but couldn't replicate the complex interaction between the aircraft, its gunfire, and supersonic shockwaves. The testing equipment of the 1950s simply wasn't sophisticated enough to model these scenarios. The fatal combination of these factors created what engineers would later call a convergence window, a specific set of conditions where an F-11 could theoretically intercept its own gunfire. The variables included altitude, dive angle, acceleration rate, and initial firing speed. While the probability seemed impossibly low, the laws of physics were about to prove otherwise. The F-11F's maintenance crews had also noticed peculiarities that, in hindsight, should have raised red flags. After gunnery exercises, they frequently found unusual wear patterns on the aircraft's nose section. These patterns suggested that the muzzle blast was creating unexpected turbulence around the forward fuselage. Some maintenance chiefs filed reports, but these concerns were lost in the rush to get the Tiger into operational service. The Tiger's fuel system added another layer of complexity to the physics problem. During a steep dive, fuel would shift toward the front of the tanks, affecting the aircraft's center of gravity. This shift, combined with the recoil from the guns, could cause subtle changes in the aircraft's trajectory. Changes that might align perfectly with the path of its own bullets. The atmospheric conditions at high altitudes pose additional challenges. Temperature variations could affect both bullet trajectory and engine performance. Cold air at altitude would increase the density of the air relative to standard conditions, affecting both the aircraft's performance and the behavior of fired rounds. These variables were well understood individually, but their combined effects had never been thoroughly analyzed. Most significantly, no one had considered how the aircraft's acceleration curve might intersect with the deceleration curve of its fired rounds. In theory, these curves could cross at multiple points depending on the flight profile. The F-11F's powerful engine meant it could maintain high acceleration even in a steep dive, while its bullets would gradually lose speed due to air resistance. This created not just one possible intersection point, but a series of them under the right conditions. These theoretical concerns were about to become terrifyingly real on a routine test flight. Tom Attridge, one of Grumman's most experienced test pilots, was about to demonstrate just how deadly these overlooked factors could be when combined with the raw power of supersonic flight. September 21, 1956, dawned clear and bright over Long Island Sound. Tom Attridge, Grumman's lead test pilot, prepared for what should have been a routine weapons test. The flight plan was straightforward: climb to 20,000 feet, perform a series of gunnery exercises, and return to base. No one expected this flight to make aviation history. The F11F Tiger gleamed on the runway at Grumman's test facility. Ground crews had loaded the 20mm cannons with standard test rounds, a mix of high explosive and tracer ammunition. The weather was perfect, with unlimited visibility and calm winds. Attridge completed his pre-flight checks with a methodical precision that had made him one of Grumman's most trusted test pilots. At 13 o'clock hours, Attridge took off. The Tiger climbed effortlessly through the crystal-clear autumn sky. The test protocol required him to begin his gunnery run at 20,000 feet, then enter a shallow dive while firing the guns. These maneuvers were designed to simulate attacking an enemy bomber from above, a primary mission for the carrier-based F11F. At 20,000 feet, Attridge leveled off and armed the guns. He began a shallow dive, accelerating toward the test area over the Atlantic. At 13:34, he squeezed the trigger. The four 20mm cannons roared to life, spitting out a stream of shells at 1,000 rounds per minute. The tracers painted bright lines through the sky, arcing away from the aircraft's nose. What happened next defied all expectations. Attridge continued his dive, pushing the nose down to a 20-degree angle. The Tiger's powerful engine, aided by gravity, accelerated the aircraft past the speed of sound. Unknown to Attridge, he was flying into a convergence point with his own bullets, which were now falling in a longer ballistic arc as they lost velocity. Suddenly, there was a tremendous impact. The windscreen shattered. The engine made a horrible grinding noise and began to lose power. Attridge's first thought was that he hit a bird, a common hazard in high-speed flight, but the damage was far too severe for a bird strike. Fighting to control the wounded aircraft, Attridge realized he had lost most of his engine power. The Tiger was descending rapidly, forcing him to look for an emergency landing site. Through the shattered windscreen, he spotted a small clearing in the wooded area ahead. It would have to do. The sequence of events leading to this impossible shot would later be reconstructed in precise detail. The Tiger had begun its attack run at 20,000 feet, firing a 4-second burst from its cannons. The 20mm shells left the barrels at approximately 2,000 feet per second, far faster than the aircraft's initial speed of 880 feet per second. As the rounds traveled forward, they began to decelerate due to air resistance. Meanwhile, Attridge had pushed his Tiger into an increasingly steep dive. The aircraft's powerful engine, combined with gravitational acceleration, caused it to gain speed rapidly. The F11F's acceleration was so dramatic that it began to catch up with its own rounds, which were now traveling more slowly. The shells, affected by both gravity and air resistance, followed a graceful ballistic arc through the sky. This arc, invisible to Attridge, would intersect perfectly with his flight path. Adding to this deadly geometry was the Tiger's tendency to pitch slightly upward when firing its guns, a characteristic that helped create the perfect angle for intersection. Weather conditions that day played a crucial role. The crystal clear visibility meant there were no visual references to help Attridge gauge his true speed and position relative to his fired rounds. The cold, dense air at altitude increased the engine's performance, while also affecting the bullet's trajectory in ways that the test parameters hadn't accounted for. At the moment of impact, Attridge's Tiger had accelerated to nearly Mach 1.1, far faster than its initial firing speed. The first rounds struck the windscreen, creating a spiderweb of cracks that severely limited visibility. Microseconds later, more rounds punctured the engine intake, wreaking havoc on the delicate compressor blades of the J-65 turbojet. The physics of this self-inflicted damage were remarkable. Some of the rounds had slowed to just a few hundred feet per second when they were struck by the very aircraft that had fired them. The collision speed was effectively the difference between the aircraft's velocity and that of the decelerating bullets, still more than enough to cause catastrophic damage. The moment of impact created a cascade of failures throughout the aircraft. The Tiger's highly integrated systems, usually an advantage, now worked against it. The shattered windscreen disrupted the careful aerodynamic flow over the fuselage. This disruption, combined with the damaged engine intake, created severe buffeting that threatened to tear the aircraft apart. Inside the cockpit, Attridge faced a barrage of warning lights and alarms. The master caution panel lit up like a Christmas tree as multiple systems began to fail. Hydraulic pressure dropped rapidly as lines ruptured from bullet impacts. The control surfaces became increasingly sluggish, requiring enormous physical effort to maintain any semblance of controlled flight. The altimeter unwound at an alarming rate. Each foot of altitude loss was precious as Attridge fought to navigate his crippled fighter toward any suitable landing site. The dense forest of Long Island offered few options. The clearing he spotted would have to do, though its size was barely adequate for a controlled crash landing. As Attridge fought to control his crippled aircraft, the Tiger began a series of violent yaws and rolls. The engine, its compressor blades shredded by its own ammunition, was rapidly losing power. What followed would be a testament to both pilot skill and luck, and would lead to one of the most extraordinary investigations in aviation history. When rescue teams reached the crash site, they found Attridge alive but seriously injured. The Tiger had carved a 300-foot path through the trees, its sleek fuselage now a twisted testament to the laws of physics. But the real investigation was just beginning, one that would force engineers to reevaluate their fundamental assumptions about supersonic aircraft design. Initial theories ranged from wildly improbable to remarkably accurate. Some suggested Attridge had encountered a UFO or been hit by lightning. Others, noting the bullet holes in the aircraft's nose, suspected hostile fire. But when test pilot Tom Attridge insisted he hadn't seen any other aircraft, investigators faced a puzzling question: where had the bullets come from? The breakthrough came during the engine examination. Embedded in the mangled compressor blades, investigators found fragments of 20mm shells. Shells that matched exactly with those loaded into the Tiger's guns that morning. Metallurgical analysis confirmed these weren't just similar rounds, they were the exact same bullets Attridge had fired. The investigation revealed a perfect storm of factors. At the moment Attridge fired his guns, his Tiger was traveling at 880 feet per second. The 20mm rounds left the barrels at about 2,000 feet per second. As the bullets traveled forward, they began slowing due to air resistance. Meanwhile, the Tiger accelerated in its dive, eventually reaching Mach 1.1, fast enough to catch up with its own decelerating rounds. Engineers calculated that during the 20-degree dive, the aircraft's flight path had intersected perfectly with the arcing trajectory of its bullets. The rounds, slowed by air resistance and pulled earthward by gravity, had traveled about 12,000 feet before being struck by their own aircraft. The odds against such an intersection were astronomical, yet it had happened. The accident report made for sobering reading. The F11F's innovative design had inadvertently created conditions where self-intersection was possible. The nose-mounted guns, the aircraft's impressive acceleration capabilities, and its high-performance dive characteristics had combined in a way no one had anticipated. The incident exposed gaps in the understanding of supersonic aircraft behavior. Wind tunnel testing of the era hadn't accounted for the complex interaction between an aircraft and its own projectiles at supersonic speeds. The accident led to new testing protocols and safety measures across the entire aviation industry. For Grumman and the Navy, the implications were immediate. New firing restrictions were implemented, limiting the circumstances under which pilots could fire their guns in steep dives. Training programs were updated to include warnings about the potential for self-intersection. The incident even influenced the design of future aircraft, with greater attention paid to projectile trajectories at supersonic speeds. The damage to the aircraft told its own story. The pattern of bullet impacts showed that multiple rounds had struck the Tiger almost simultaneously. The first hits shattered the windscreen, sending fragments of bulletproof glass into the cockpit. Milliseconds later, more rounds punched through the nose, tearing into the engine intake. The precision of these strikes suggested that the bullets had maintained a remarkably stable trajectory despite traveling over 2 miles. Investigators found evidence that at least 3 rounds had entered the engine. One had severed a major fuel line, another had destroyed several compressor blades, and a third had penetrated deep into the engine core. The combination of damage had caused a catastrophic loss of power, leaving Attridge with few options for survival. Flight data analysis revealed another startling fact. The Tiger's acceleration during its dive had been even more dramatic than initially thought. In the 40 seconds between firing the guns and impact, the aircraft had gained nearly 250 knots of airspeed. This remarkable acceleration capability, normally a point of pride for Grumman, had contributed directly to the accident. The investigation team recreated the incident using sophisticated computer models, cutting-edge technology for 1956. These simulations show that the self-intersection scenario, while incredibly unlikely, was actually repeatable under specific conditions. The combination of dive angle, initial firing speed, and acceleration created a narrow window where aircraft and bullets could meet. Medical reports detailed Attridge's injuries: multiple lacerations from the shattered windscreen, a broken leg from the crash landing, and severe bruising from the impact. Yet his survival was considered miraculous given the violence of the crash. The Tiger's robust construction, designed to withstand carrier landings, had helped protect him during the final impact. The accident report made a series of crucial recommendations. Future aircraft designs would need more sophisticated modeling of projectile trajectories at supersonic speeds. Gun placement and firing arcs would require careful evaluation to prevent similar incidents. Training programs would need updating to include awareness of this previously unknown hazard. Tom Attridge's incredible survival of this self-inflicted shootdown would become legendary in aviation circles. But the real impact of this bizarre incident would reach far beyond one pilot's brush with death, fundamentally changing how we approach the design and testing of combat aircraft. The F11F Tiger's self-shootdown incident left an indelible mark on aviation history. Beyond the sensational headlines of a pilot shooting himself down, it fundamentally changed how aircraft manufacturers approach weapons system design and testing. Immediate changes swept through the aviation industry. Computer modeling of projectile trajectories became mandatory for all new fighter aircraft. Engineers developed sophisticated simulations that could predict the complex interactions between aircraft, weapons, and atmospheric conditions at supersonic speeds. The incident also led to the development of new safety protocols. Fighter aircraft were equipped with improved fire control systems that could calculate danger zones, areas where self-intersection might be possible. Training programs began incorporating these lessons, teaching pilots to be aware of their projectiles' trajectories during high-speed maneuvers. For future aircraft designs, gun placement received much more scrutiny. The trend toward nose-mounted guns didn't end, but engineers now carefully considered the relationship between gun position, muzzle velocity, and aircraft performance. Some designs incorporated slight gun angles to reduce the risk of self-intersection. The accident's influence extended beyond military aviation. The incident highlighted the importance of understanding how objects behave at supersonic speeds. Knowledge that would prove crucial in the development of everything from space vehicles to civilian supersonic transport. Modern fighter aircraft now use sophisticated computer systems that can predict and prevent similar incidents. These systems take into account factors like aircraft speed, trajectory, weapon characteristics, and atmospheric conditions to ensure safe weapons employment. The Tiger's self-shootdown sparked a revolution in aeronautical testing. Wind tunnels, previously focused mainly on airframe aerodynamics, were modified to study projectile behavior at supersonic speeds. These tests revealed complex interactions between shock waves, bullet trajectories, and aircraft surfaces that no one had previously considered. The incident had a lasting impact on pilot training. The US Navy incorporated the lessons into their advanced fighter tactics courses. Pilots learned to consider their weapons' trajectories not just in terms of hitting their target, but also in terms of their own safety. The phrase, Attridge angle, became pilot slang for the dangerous combination of speed and dive angle that could lead to self-intersection. The investigation's findings influenced the design of several iconic aircraft. The F4 Phantom Anu, which entered service a few years after the incident, incorporated lessons learned from the Tiger. Its weapons systems included sophisticated fire control computers that could predict bullet trajectories under various flight conditions. Perhaps most significantly, the incident changed how the aviation industry approached the unknown. The fact that such a seemingly impossible accident could occur led to more rigorous testing of edge cases. Unlikely, but potentially catastrophic scenarios. This emphasis on exploring the improbable has saved countless lives in aviation. Even today, the F11F incident is studied at test pilot schools worldwide. It serves as a powerful reminder that the laws of physics don't care about human assumptions. Modern test pilots are taught to question everything, no matter how unlikely it might seem. The incident's influence extended beyond military aviation into space exploration. NASA engineers studying orbital mechanics for the early space program found parallels with the Tiger incident. The complex mathematics of objects moving at extreme speeds in varying atmospheric conditions became crucial for spacecraft design. The Tiger's story is now part of standard aerospace engineering curriculum. Universities use it as a case study in how seemingly unrelated factors can combine to create unprecedented situations. Engineering students learn that the impossible sometimes isn't. and that thorough testing must account for even the most unlikely scenarios. Modern combat aircraft carry this legacy in their DNA. Their flight computers constantly monitor weapons employment parameters, analyzing countless variables in real time to prevent similar incidents. What was once left to chance and pilot judgment is now protected by layers of sophisticated safety systems. The Tiger that shot itself down remains one of aviation's most bizarre accidents. But the lessons learned that day over Long Island helped shape modern aircraft design. The next time you see a fighter jet roaring through the sky, remember Tom Attridge and his impossible shot. A reminder that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from the most unlikely accidents. If you love military history like I do, subscribe for more content like this.